What's up, everybody, and welcome back into the Play the Fight Song College Football Show. A big time episode tonight as we are covering the Big Ten, JP and I's conference. You can see our helmets off to the side over on the background. Iowa, Nebraska will both be covered tonight, as well as the other 16 teams, as the 18-team Big Ten will take off this year with the additions of USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon. And we're going to cover them all. We're also going to give you a player to watch as normal, our hot take, bold take, and a conference championship prediction. But the boys are all here. Reese is through traveling for a big event upcoming. But JP, how are we doing tonight? We ready to talk Big Ten football?
Yeah, doing well. Pumped to do this one. This is going to be this is a behemoth of a conference to cover just with all the teams in it. And it's coast to coast. I think it's a little more difficult, I think, of a conference. All these teams are just so different in a lot of different ways. Like the Big 12, they all kind of have the same identity in how they handle things, and they're all similar programs. This is not that case. So it is definitely a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it sure is. Jake, Big Ten Media Days going on, just wrapping up kind of this week. Anything that stood out to you from a coach maybe that you've seen going around Big Ten Media Days that you'll cover tonight?
Yes. The reason I paused or stuttered is because I thought you're kind of teeing me up to just kind of go off on Deshaun Foster, but I don't want to do that. I actually thought he had some nice things to say in other interviews. Jed Fish was actually the one I most recently listened to. I am covering Washington, so kind of interested to break them down a little bit. And this conference is kind of chalk. Actually, it usually is chalk. So I'm interested to see if those 4 new teams can really shake things up. It actually has me more interested in the Big Ten than years past for me. So
yeah, you definitely add one in with Oregon that kind of makes their way into the conference and is a lot of people's preseason pick or up there. Reese, I'll give you a different page. You just got done traveling. How was airport travel during the midst of absolute chaos through airports?
Well, I was flying Delta, so I was a little concerned that
I was just
my
gonna
stuff
say
was going to get moved. But shout out Syracuse Hancock International Airport, just absolutely crushing it. Nothing was delayed, and then JFK in New York was just on the money. Nothing got delayed. So
that's absolutely astonishing because I was traveling during the first problems with it, and it was a nightmare. I mean, Atlanta looked as overrun as China did. I mean, there was billions and billions of people in one airport at one time. It was unbearable to be in. So good to hear Reese is on the ground back in the Midwest, Kansas City right now, Reese, right?
Kansas City.
All right, good. The home of the Chiefs and Royals. But let's talk college football. Let's go into the Big Ten. We have a ton to cover tonight. We are covering all 18 teams. Our fast segment at the end will be 6 teams in 6 minutes. But let's lead it off with Jake. As usual, we're going to go with team-by-team previews. And the first team we are going to talk about is probably one that everybody wants to hear, and that is the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ryan Day's squad goes into 2024. What are they going to look like?
Yeah, not really making you guys wait around too long. We're just going to get right to the point, especially because this might be one of the big talking points of all the football teams across America right now. I mean, you look at ESPN and they're even talking about Ohio State every other day. So, it's kind of a big deal. Most of the time it's just Paul Feinbaum probably wanting to crap on Ryan Day. And I don't think that's necessarily needed, but I think this is something to consider with all of the things at stake and the importance of this season, not only for Ryan Day, but for this Ohio State team that is really, really talented. Are they really talented just because I feel like the talent's a little bit lesser in college football this year or just a little more unknown? Or does it feel like that this could be one of the least talented offenses Ryan Day has had in his time at Ohio State? I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think the offense is going to hinder this team from winning a national championship, but it's just something to note, even a few years ago with Wilson and Jigma and CJ Stroud, like how crazy talented that offense was compared to this year where it's really running back heavy. Honestly, I want to start there because Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson could be, somebody said on a podcast the other day, the best running back duo in college football history. That's really setting the bar high. And I think it's a bit crazy to say, but it's definitely one of the better duos we've had in probably the last 5 years. Quinshon Judkins transfers over from Ole Miss, and now you have kind of a 1A, 1B kind of thunder and lightning combo in the backfield. So we're really, when you think of Ohio State, you're always associating great wide receiver play, but maybe they will rely on the run game this year, like their counterparts in Michigan. That's maybe the blueprint to win a national championship in 2024. Speaking of wide receivers, you look at Jeremiah Smith is a 5-star freshman who the talks are really high on this kid. And Bud Elliott, who covers national college football, says he hasn't raved about a guy in a long time quite like he has. I'm really interested to see if he can come in and be the number one guy, or is Emeka Ibuka the number one option for the incoming transfer from Kansas State, who is presumably the starter right now. Will Howard comes over from Kansas State. He's going to be probably the number one option at quarterback for Ryan Day's offense this year. He ranked 53rd in passing efficiency last year. I saw this guy for the last 5 years being an Iowa State fan. I've talked about how I don't think Will Howard is much of an upgrade from Kyle McCord, but he does increase his completion percentage every single year since his freshman year. So he's getting better year after year, and maybe he just needs some more receivers and some more wide receiver threats around him to really up-level his game. Cade Stover, though, was a huge piece in the passing game last year, the tight end for them. He goes out. Does G. Scott or Will Kacmarek, do those two guys take Stover's spot and the production that Stover leaves them? That's really interesting. Going back on the defensive side of the ball, I think this is one of the best defenses in all of college football. And they go out and get Caleb Downs, who I think was the best transfer pickup on all of last year. And out of the short stint of the portal window, I think Caleb Downs was the best transfer prospect that we've ever had in college football. Him and Denzel Burke are going to highlight probably the best secondary in all of college football. So the back end is going to be really good. JT Tuamaloau, we all know that he's going to be the star edge rusher for them. I want to see him take that next step. They kind of consider him a first-round pick, but I want to see it a little more. I would like to see him up his sack numbers and things like that for them to really consider this defense to be elite. So that kind of leaves you there. Schedule-wise, non-con is an absolute cakewalk. We don't need to cover that, but they do get Iowa. They have to go to Eugene. I think that's the big talking point of the offseason. And they play at Penn State. So 2 road games that are going to be extremely challenging. They get Michigan at home to end the year. Can they end the losing streak? Obviously is the biggest question. But I look at Penn State and at Oregon. Can you go 1-1 in that game? Like, we're in the 12-team playoff era now. So just go 1-1 in both of those games. And I think you're going to be sitting fine. And we've talked about this before. Maybe missing the Big Ten title game in Indianapolis isn't the worst thing to happen. You get some extra time off to get ready for that 12-team playoff.
Yeah, it's a team that's absolutely loaded, highly touted by every expert in the country. JP, what do you think on the Bucks this year? Do you think they get through the Michigan hump and into Indy this year?
I mean, we'll get to everything in the prediction segment later. To talk about this team and what their identity is going to be, to be completely honest with you, I think they have the people in the trenches on both sides of the football to kind of be that ground and pound team that also has the ability to beat you with the pass with just elite receivers on the outside. And on defense, we know the interior is really good. We know the back end's good. So the defense is going to carry this team a little bit more. Hopefully the offense, it wasn't poor last year. It's not like they struggled in a lot of ways, but they weren't as explosive in certain spots where they really needed to be to go win games. So win the trenches, run the football really well, make this easier on Will Howard. And I think they've done really well to shore up the offensive line to help that out.
Reese, Kyle McCord, the former Ohio State quarterback, transfers to Syracuse. Will Howard steps in. Do you think Will Howard can be that guy and actually make Ohio State fans happy for once?
I don't know how much of an upgrade. I think he's maybe a little bit, because this guy did lead Kansas State and they did win the Big 12 when they beat TCU a couple years ago as well too. So I don't know if he's a tremendous upgrade. I think he might be a little bit better, but I mean, what better way than to have a good run game? And for Ohio State, you have Ryan Day, who's going to be able to scheme guys open. So I think he'll be successful. How successful he's going to be, I think he's just going to determine on being able to not turn the ball over for this offense. So
a run game is uber important in the Big Ten. Let's move down to the next team, talking run game anyway. We're going to let JP talk on his Iowa Hawkeyes for a while. Tim Lester comes in as OC, which I'm sure he'll mention. So maybe we'll see a better Iowa offense. JP, tell us about the Hawks in 2024.
Yeah, again, we'll do our fan perspective, so I'll get more in depth here later in the month, probably closer to the mid-August, around week 0. But to talk about Iowa, I think you're just going to hear a lot for the national media. It's the same narrative you've been hearing for years about a poor offense. The offensive line hasn't quite been the same. The defense is elite. All the narratives, you can kind of start checking the boxes and, filling out your bingo card. What I will say about this is just kind of listening to the beat reporters and then people within, and then Ferentz today at yesterday at media days. It's the Tim Lester hire. It seems to have worked out in the way that it fits really well, and everybody really likes what he's doing. There's also a lot of confidence from the players in what he's got going on. Now, Ferentz seems to, usually you can kind of gather from Ferentz that he still got his hands in things. It's less when he's talking about, our identity and how we do things and stuff. I think he's more open to kind of letting newer run schemes come in, new brand of college football, and the way they run the football. The blocking schemes are a little bit different. Now, is that a learning curve? 100%. It's going to be more of a West Coast rather than a pro style offense. But you look at the guys that they have on the offense. We'll start with Caden McNamara. Cade hasn't been really healthy since his start in Iowa City, if we're being completely honest. And that's why they went and got Brendan Sullivan from Northwestern. Marco Linez actually is put number 2 on the depth chart at the moment. Now, that's a little bit because Brendan Sullivan didn't get there till this summer, so he hasn't taken the snaps and learned this offense as Lester's come in. McNamara he's been pretty much telling people he feels better than he has in a really, really long time. And I do believe him. It doesn't matter if he feels that way or not. It's, can you stay healthy? And if he can't stay healthy, there's got to be a number 2 option. And I'm going to assume that's going to be Brendan Sullivan after he gets his times with the ones and all the snaps around the offense. I think the running back room is still really good. I think Caleb Johnson, Jazz Patterson, I think they're higher upside than Williams is. But I do think that you learned last year about who was kind of a more steady rock and a more steady ball carrier for this team. They're really talented at the tight end position, and Addison Ostringa and Luke Lachey. Lachey's back healthy. I think he feels really good about where he is. Now, flipping to the defense, it's going to be an elite defense. I mean, Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins up the middle. Linebacker are all world. That's one of the best combos in the country. The defensive secondary is disgusting with Castro, Schulte, Deshaun Lee, Jamari Harris, guys like that, Xavier Wampa. There's just guys littered on that defense, and I think they'll be really stout on the defensive line as well. I think everything that comes down to this with the schedule they were given, just with it, the uneven rivalries that are kind of laid out, and Iowa gets 3 protected rivalries rather than everybody else's 2 or 1 in the Big Ten. You got to take advantage of it this year because it's probably going to turn the other way in 2025, and you're going to get a rough schedule and a lot of guys coming in who haven't played a ton. So it's time to take advantage of it. I think there's an opportunity to. We just need to see this in action before somebody really, looks at this with true confidence saying it's going to be way better. So I really am excited to watch this team, but I got to get to week 1 and just see what this looks like. And we won't really know until week 2 when Iowa State comes to town. So again, outside perspective, I'm sure you guys have all heard it and seen it. Everybody's just sitting and waiting right now on the Hawks.
Yeah, and that's a fair way to put it. I think an interesting thing that I've heard during the offseason on Iowa is a lot of the guys in their post-practice interviews have been talking about a lot of the motion being implemented into the offense. So it'll be kind of a revamped look, but will Ferentz be in the mix? Like, do you feel like Ferentz maybe was more responsible for the play calling sheet than maybe we knew with Brian too? Like I'm saying Kirk in this instance.
Yeah, I think his fingers were a little too deep in that for sure. I think he decided to step back and really let Lester work this offense, say, this is our identity. This is how we handle things. But you can kind of have the reins here and drive this offense to where you want it to be.
We'll go down to the rivals perspective. Give Jake his 2 cents on the Hawks this year.
I really could care less about what anybody has to say about the offense. No, I'm not saying about the Hawks in general. No, I'm getting there. I think I'm sorry. I don't believe that Cade McNamara is healthy. I think it's a lot of coach talk. I mean, I saw the guy literally limping in the spring video to get through 3-4 months of full blown contact here when fall camp comes around. I'm a little skeptical on that side, but I think Brendan Sullivan was exactly what they needed to get to put a Band-Aid over that. I actually just have a question about the defense and just why they did such a good job. It wasn't Jackson was the kid who came over from Virginia last year, right?
Yep.
Or was Nick? Yeah.
Nick Jackson.
I get confused between him and Higgins, but I'm just wondering, like, why didn't they go and get a defensive lineman? And I feel like they're missing a little bit of a piece that they could have hit on the portal because they had such success grabbing a guy like Nick Jackson last year. I just don't understand why they didn't do that.
What they're missing is a true pass rusher, a guy to get on the edge and to get after the quarterback on third down. I think they love the depth that they have right now. Like Y.A. Black, Aaron Graves, Deontay Craig, Ethan Herkett are all guys who've got a ton of snaps. I mean, you could go too deep and look at these guys with real confidence. It's just a true pass rusher. And I think that'll hopefully come with coverage sacks and finding a way to get a guy in space. In my personal opinion, it's going to be Grazer. It's going to be a Herkett with most of those sacks this year. And I think Kirk is picking and choosing when to use the portal, and I think he was really offense focused this year. Not that they wouldn't got something crazy. I mean, what did their skill guy? They went and got Jacob Gill from Northwestern. Like nothing groundbreaking, but I think that was where his thought process was.
Reese, what do you think? As the hometown kid from Iowa, you got to have some thoughts on the Hawks this year.
I mean, as long as you don't have Deacon Hill or Spencer Petras, and you can give this team, I don't know, like
well, you
a
keep
top
Petras,
80
you
offense.
keep Petras out of the same sentence as Deacon Hill. Spencer Petras is not
it's
Deacon
the same
Hill.
thing.
No,
Phelan
it is
is
not.
out of
No,
bounds.
it is not.
The same thing. You could clip that for either one of those two. But I mean, like I said, I think if you give this team a top 80, 70 offense, like with how good that defense is, this could be a team that could maybe sneak into Indianapolis. I mean,
if they get a top
like,
80 offense, Reese, I want you to know they're playing in the Final Four. Like they get a top 70 offense. They are one of the Final Four teams standing.
They were what 100. They were what 140th last year.
That's
like,
what I'm saying. But that's a big jump. That's a huge jump. I'm thinking inside the 90s is like
cannot be any worse. You literally cannot be any worse. You were last.
No, I agree. But I'm saying inside 80s and 70s is like this team
How
is not
about
moving
90?
the football scoring and nobody's scoring. Yeah.
They're scoring 20. Give them 3 touchdowns and a field goal a game.
All right. There it is. There's Iowa. JP will dive further into in this fan perspective here in a couple of weeks, going through their entire season, what he thinks from his perspective as a fan, not just the general knowledge he just spit to you. But there's the Hawks. Let's move down the line. We're going down to Reese to cover Rutgers. The Scarlet Knights have a little bit of noise around them. Reese, tell us about this team.
So, I mean, for Rutgers and Greg Schiano, the people of Poughkeepsie are going to keep trusting. I mean, he's coming back for his 5th year this year. They got a bowl win last year over Miami. A lot of people forget about that. And it's their first winning season since 2010. And going along with that, too, it's also the most experience this guy's bringing back since he's been there. He's got 16 starters coming back, 8 on offense, 8 on defense. And you bring back, I didn't realize he had this nickname, but Ethan Kiliakmanis is the Greek rifle. Didn't know that. Kind of a cool nickname. You get your new quarterback who links up with his old offensive coordinator. I'm going to butcher this name. I'm being strong and trying to pronounce it, but it's Kirk Ciarrocca. I don't know how to say that one.
Say it with the
people in New Jersey don't get too mad at me, but he comes over from Minnesota, and these two had success when they were over there. So you're getting a quarterback with his previous OC. So I think early on they're going to have success together. You won't have as much kind of growing pains trying to feel each other out. And then you also bring back a veteran running back room and then one of the most experienced offensive lines that Schiano's ever had too. So this is a team where Greg's your head coach. They're very hard-nosed. They're very stubborn. So they're going to be stingy on offense. And then on paper, it's probably one of the tougher defenses in the Big Ten, I want to say. In the front 7, they bring back 3 fifth-year seniors and even a 6-year senior who have time in this conference and know what it takes to win a ball game 17-13 against Indiana, Purdue, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska. Like, it's guys that know how to win in this conference. And then Phil Steele also has his secondary listed as top 25. So if these guys up front are able to get some pressure on the quarterback, expect them to be able to pick off errant throws or jump some balls and have some more success there too. And then when you look at the schedule, I mean, you get 5 games at home, and the furthest west, I mean, you do travel to USC, but that's your one far west trip. Other than that, you go to Nebraska. Otherwise, everybody else, you stick around on the East Coast-ish. So that's going to help out in their favor. And then I think the biggest weeks to know what this team's going to be about this year is weeks 3 and 4 when they face Virginia Tech on the road and you get Washington at home. If you can find a way to split these games and start off the year 3-1, and then somehow you potentially split their 4-game stretch, kind of the tougher one they have in the beginning of the or in the middle of the year, I don't think it'd be crazy for this team to make a bowl game. I mean, their over/under is sitting at 6.5. I definitely think they can get there this year. Like I said, I don't expect them to be a very exciting team, but I mean, there's Greg Schiano, so you know what to expect. They're going to be a stubborn, hard-nosed team. And I can, like I said, getting them to get back to a bowl game, they can hit that over. I just don't know if they get to 8. I can see 7 in there if they play well early enough, because, I mean, non-conference, you have Howard and Akron, and that's fine. But I think that Virginia Tech game is going to be massive to see what they're going to be like. I think it's going to be a tougher one for them to win. But if you can find a way to go on the road, maybe play spoiler or just figure out what your identity is going to be this year, I don't think this will be a teams will blink twice at.
Yeah, it's interesting to follow Rutgers, a team that's tried to reignite the Schiano spark from the mid to late 2000s, and it just hasn't come around yet. But this is probably the most hype I've heard around them in a preseason in quite a while. JP, what do you think on the Scarlet Knights this year?
Yeah, two things. Not Poughkeepsie, New York, Reese. This is in Piscataway, New Jersey.
Why is it Poughkeepsie? My bad.
I think
I
you're
literally
just
have
New York
I
State of
swear to God,
mind.
Places up there, man.
I literally have I
gonna-
have that
you're-
written down right here. Why did I say Poughkeepsie?
You're gonna
I think
just
you're-
actually
Oh
we
my
just
God.
lost a Rutgers subscriber.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hand
I
up.
think looking at this team, I'm a little higher on them than maybe Reese is for sure. I think this is the most talented team that they've had there in a long time. I think Kyle Managai is legitimately top 4 backs in the Big Ten. I saw him firsthand and at Kinnick last year. He struggled a little bit, but that was just because they couldn't find the pass game anywhere on an Iowa defense. I was feeling it that day, but it doesn't mean this kid can't go for 1,400. They're going to run the ball. I really think they ran at 61% of the time last year. They're a little more hard nosed. I think Callie McManus got the short straw at Minnesota. I think he's better than kind of what he showed. So I'm higher on this team in Rutgers, and I think, like Reese, you literally hit this on the head. This schedule is workable. I mean, capital W, workable and winnable. So that's where I'm at with Rutgers.
Jake, on the Scarlet Knights, do you think they have a chance to make a little bit of noise, 8-9 win range?
Yeah, I don't know what our August plans are, but over under win totals. This is one of my favorites now that you mentioned it, because Reese is 6.5, and while you guys were talking, I went up and looked at it. You can get it for plus money right now, 6.5 at plus 118. I love their schedule. I think they're hard nosed. I love Monagai. I think that's exactly what you need in a good back for a Big Ten offense, and I think Callie McManus can spread the field out just a little bit. I like what JP said. I think he did get kind of the shorter straw, and this is underratedly, like, what would you say, a top 8 defense in this league? Maybe
Yeah, they were really
7
good
or
last year.
6.
They were legit last year too. Like people forget, like they handled Virginia Tech when they were having troubles. Like
Yeah.
Michigan didn't really start pouring it on till late against them. They had Wisconsin in check the entire time. Like Penn State was in check. Like they had teams in check almost every week.
Yep.
Yeah, they did. They're that gritty, hard-nosed team, and they'll win a couple of games or compete deeper in games that they shouldn't. That's just Rutgers football under Schiano, and maybe he'll have one of those years again. But all right, that's Rutgers. Moving down the line, this one's to me, and it's on Nebraska. Anytime I get a chance to talk about Nebraska, I get a little bit worried of me getting long-winded with it, so I'll try and do my best, but I will also be doing a fan perspective preview here within the next couple of weeks, probably closer to week 0 for me. But talking about the Huskers in 2024, there's a lot to be excited about, as there is every year. It feels like, as a fan, off-season national champions seems like every season. Can we finally put it together? We'll have to wait and see. But looking at the quarterback room, you got to mention Dylan Raiola. You get the number 1 overall quarterback recruit in the country. That's going to bring some excitement, especially when your quarterbacks accounted for 27 of your 30 turnovers last year with Jeff Sims, Henrik Harburg, and Chubba Purdy. Chubba Purdy leaves for Nevada. Harburg's still in the picture. They bring in Dylan Raiola. Jeff Sim goes to Arizona State. So the quarterback room is there. It has some depth, but it's very young. You got to think a 5-star recruit steps in at Georgia. You have a true freshman that plays the national quarterback. You wouldn't really think twice about it. That's just what those programs do. So I expect a little bit more maturity from Raiola. What's the worst that can happen, Nebraska fans? We don't make a bowl game? Yeah, throw him in the mix. Let Dylan Raiola run the show and see how it goes. You have the depth in the backfield I really like. Not a lot of people would agree with me there, but you bring in Dante Dowdell from Oregon, who averaged 5 yards a carry in his time there. That's a good addition. Gabe Irvin, he's trying to stay healthy. You get Ramir Johnson back from New York. He's a hell of a player, loves Nebraska, so I love him. And then just to round it out, Quentin Ives is a good option there. And Emmett Johnson, who stepped in as a starter last year, was viable too. So I think the 1-2 punches are there. A reason we struggled last year in offense was I don't think we had a go-to target on the outside. You bring in Billy Kemp. He doesn't really pan out. Now you bring in Jamal Banks, which is, I'm going to say, twice the receiver that Billy Kemp ever was in the slot. Jamal Banks, 70 catches last year at Wake Forest, ton of college football experience. And then you have the young talent. You have Jalen Lloyd, Malachi Coleman. Those two guys are going to make a lot of noise in the Big Ten downfield, both fast. Jalen Lloyd runs track, competed in the Big Ten this year in track, was really good as a true freshman, so he should have a decent sophomore season ahead of him. On the offensive line side of things, good news. We brought back 4 of the 5. It's listed as 3. It's 4 of the 5. Teddy Prohaska was hurt, came back, played middle of the year on. He needs to see a little bit of improvement, but Bryce Benhart was really good compared to his sophomore year last year, so it's good to get him back. But then you bring in Micah Mazuka, the Florida transfer. And if you don't know who Micah Mazuka is, he's the big number 74 that posted up in that Florida fight against whoever that was that night in the SEC game. That's Micah Mazuka. He now plays for Nebraska. On the defensive side of the ball, we're really good up front. We're deep. Jamari Butler got his weight up. He's 260. Ty Robinson, NFL prospects back. Nash Hutamaker spent all offseason wrestling in the Big Ten. So, he's going to be ready to go. He'll put on a little bit of weight, but be more mobile in the middle. And then I think the secondary is where my questions lie. I'm not sure Bly Hill should be a player that steps up, but you lose Omar Brown, Quentin Newsome. You got to have guys to fill those gaps. The star of the show, Tommy Hill. Tommy Hill's a really good, highest graded returner on this defense. He should make a big impact. And then Isaac Gifford's a guy you should always be excited about because he's hard-nosed and he's going to make Big Ten plays in Big Ten weather. So I think both sides of the ball have a lot of excitement around it, as Nebraska always does. We just need to get through week 1 with UTEP and actually start 1-0 for the first time since 2019. So looking forward to it. Schedule is very favorable. The first 7 games, you obviously bring in Colorado week 2, but it's going to be a fun season, and we'll take you through it fan perspective wise. But that's what I got on the general outlook for the Huskers. Is just, can they do it under year 2 with Matt Rule? JP, I'll go to you first. Your rival point of view. What do you think on Nebraska?
This is one of the more veteran teams, I think, in the Big Ten. And I think what's nice with their veteranness is that this is not Rule's first year. Like, these guys have played under Rule, which definitely helps build a culture, build a team, build, confidence in what they're doing. When you look, that was my question. I think you hit it pretty well. Is just the running back room and what it looks like, and if they could find a guy to really lean on rather than going by committee. Because I feel like they've been a committee team the last couple of years when they don't want to be. They really want to feature guy. And so I like that you brought that up. And then the secondary as well is, there's not that many teams that are going to exploit that in this schedule. And so I think that's, if you can hide some guys and find a way to put them into a zone and not get burnt, I think they'll be just fine on that side of the football.
Jake, what do you think on Nebraska this year?
Like, defensively, just looking at the roster, juniors and seniors all over the board, I think this is one of the more productive defenses coming back. So that's something you can rely on. I just look at like Dylan Raiola and all the talk of him in the offseason, and I think it's very well earned. I'm just something he can't control, and it's his offensive coordinator. Like, how long does Nebraska have to wait until Glenn Thomas actually gets his hands on the offense and they say, Satterfield, you're good to go, man? I know that Satterfield can't control Jeff Sims fumbling the ball 100 times. I understand that, but don't put a kid in bad situations when you go boring run, 3rd and 10, make a play. You know what I mean? And I think Dylan Raiola could be the same thing. I think he's smart enough to not throw some of those passes that Purdy and Sims threw last year, but don't put the kid in 3rd and long situations all the time with your conservative play calling. Like, open it up a little bit. At this point, you could tell the tone in your voice, Parks. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? So that's my concern with Nebraska this year, if I had one.
Yeah, that's a good point. Satterfield had this terrible tendency last year we'd be busting 5-yard runs off 2 or 3 in a row, and then we'll throw 3 straight passes and punt. And one of the quotes we jokingly say in Nebraska fandom is, he stepped up on the podium one time. I don't know if you guys know this, but he said, sometimes you got to have the balls to go 3 and out. And I hate that the coach said that, but
I've never heard
quote. He said, sometimes you got to have
it on first down then, man.
Yeah.
So I think that sums up his coaching career right there. Actually,
he dealt with a lot of injuries. I will give him that, but it's a big year of, I know Rule has stuck up for him a bunch, but it's a big year on whether or not they'll keep him around. Let's keep it moving. I know I spent a lot of time, so I apologize.
Wait, I just want to make a mental note. A mental note for all of us that Parky said it's going to be a fun season at the end of his segment. So if Nebraska's, we have that to remember for somebody to make clips later. I just want to make sure we have that done.
You have to, if you're going to start chirping people like that, you have to get a set team that actually changes your Saturday mood if they lose. You can't throw it around and then
this is true.
Yeah,
he does it all the time.
I'm just saying.
All right.
You gotta have that. We
got to get your fandom more into it so I can dish it back, damn it. But all right, let's move down the line. Let's go back up to the top. Jake's going to take us through another very important team, and that is the Nittany Lions of Penn State. Jake, tell us about this team.
Was there anybody happier to hear that there's a 12-team playoff in college football than James Franklin?
No.
I think I want to ask that. No. And I'm going to say that too. What better time than there being no divisions for the Big Ten as well. Like, this is the best opportunity that James Franklin has had in his entire tenure at Penn State. But when we look at last year and look how close they really were, it's obvious to say this, but it all falls on the shoulders of what it felt like with the offense and particularly the quarterback, Drew Aller, who I am still high on. I still think there is upside for him there. Threw for 46% in those 3 losses last year to Michigan, Ohio State, and Ole Miss. You just plain and simple, you have to be better. Who can you throw to? Julian Fleming comes over from Ohio State. Is he going to be the number one option? A guy who has a tendency to be injury prone. Is he an upgrade from Keandre Lambert-Smith, who went to Auburn? I'm really not so sure, but it doesn't really matter on personnel. You bring in Andy Kotelnicki from Kansas. That is the big get of the offseason. It's not any of the transfers. It's bringing him over from Lance Leipold's staff, who I saw it firsthand. Like, Jason Bean steps in last year and the offense doesn't skip a beat. Yes, Jason Bean had talent. He can use his legs, but that's a lot of play calling to set up a guy like that and to just get off in the ground and running when you got to take over for Jalen Daniels. So that's going to be huge. And how can Kotelnicki improve Aller as a passer? The lack of deep passing game was really the big reason their duo running back room kind of regressed from their freshman year. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, 2 of the best running backs in this league. This would easily be the best duo if Ohio State just didn't have an unprecedented running back room right now. Those guys can take another step, but it's got to become they got to get some support from the long passing game. It just has to happen. Let's go to the defensive side. Another coordinator change when Manny Diaz heads to Duke for the head coaching job. Tom Allen steps in after leaving or getting fired from Indiana. Love that pickup too. I think he's got a couple of the best coordinators in all of college football right now. And his first move, and was kind of suggested by the player himself, Abdul Carter, one of the best edge rushers in all of college football, moves from outside linebacker down to the defensive end position. Really excited for him there. I think it's going to be a good spot for him because that's really what he's known for, is getting after the passer. It's not necessarily in coverage and things like that. But I mean, if you're Tom Allen, you just get an embarrassment of riches on defense in your first year here in Happy Valley. You get linebacker Kobe King, the safeties Jalen Reed and Kevin Winston Jr. are some of the best in this league in all of college football. So you miss Michigan and you get Ohio State at home. What happened last year? You went 0-2 in those games. You don't even play one of those opponents this year. That's absolutely huge. I really want to see Penn State take this next step because they were like the middleman of the powerhouses in college football, your Alabamas, your Georgias, your Clemsons. And then there was kind of the rest of college football and Ohio State and Michigan, sorry. And then there was like Penn State right in the middle. Like, they were better than the above average, like your top 12 to 25 teams in college football, but they couldn't beat Ohio State and they couldn't beat Michigan. They couldn't get into that top 4 playoff spot. So really interested to see how the season pans out for this team. And maybe they still dropped Ohio State at home, but you go 10-2 and you get a 10 seed in the playoff. That's what I think we're most excited with the playoff and the expanded playoff is Penn State's the prime example. How can they do? Maybe they even get a home playoff game in that first round.
There's a lot of Drew Aller slander out in the world right now. JP, are you a guy that believes in Drew Aller? Do you think Penn State can take a little step forward there on offense?
I certainly hope so. I think the hire is correct. I think also, not that he wasn't put in position to succeed last year, but there was so much pressure on him. It felt like it was like, oh, we're a quarterback away. Quarterback shows up, he feels that pressure, and you can kind of see it in the big moments. Now, it wasn't just because of the scheme. I mean, he missed open throws, he made bad decisions consistently, but we need to find a way to get him more comfortable, and we need to just lean on this running back room with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Like, this is a great two-headed monster that they used really well last year. Let's just make sure that if Aller is going to take a step forward, we don't need that to be a superstar step forward. We just need that to be, above a Jag Plus. I don't even know what's between a Jag Plus
can he
and
be
an all-star.
like a lesser version of JJ McCarthy feels like the perfect answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you really
you just
comparing
need
it
a
to
guy to
last year.
distribute the football and not turn it over and kind of do things when you need him to. Like, we don't need a guy game breaker. We don't need Trace McSorley even, I don't think. And
Like,
upside may be better. Does that matter?
Yeah.
No.
well, I just think that even Aller's got more pro potential than, say, Dylan Gabriel. Like, that's a guy who's on his 6th or 7th year of college football Aller's very young. I think he just needs time. Like you said, there was a lot of pressure for him to be the guy at Penn State, and I think he still can be.
Gonna
But
be there
he's
this
got
year
to,
too.
yeah, he's just got to prove it. Because I mean, JP, you would understand. You could have all the great running backs you want, but if you can't throw outside of 10 yards and you load the box, like it
Yeah.
means nothing to have a good run game.
Yeah. I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I think they'll find a way to get guys the football in space. I hope. It's got to.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Franklin's been thinking, whether he says it or not. Like,
I'm rooting for
they
Penn
need
State.
it.
I want Penn State to make that jump.
They're always a little bit of a de facto team for you, Jake. I feel like over the time of us doing this show, at least, you were at least a fan of them last year. You kind of had high hopes for them, and they didn't get there. But I'll go quickly to Reese. Reese, do you think Franklin's going to be that guy? He'll get him into the playoff, and maybe he can get him a win in that scenario?
They'll go to the playoff, but I think it depends on who they're going to pull. I mean, if they do get that 10 seed, if they play the 7, or if they get the 11 and get the 6, I don't know. And like we talk about the guy how much, but I think it's going to come back to Aller. Like they're always a solid team on defense. They always have a good running back room, but can you have a quarterback that can just manage to not turn the ball over? Insert the clip of that mom from that bowl game last year when he threw that absolute duck, and you can just see her mouthing, "What the?" Like just
Yeah.
if he as long as he is not that a version of what we saw of him, I think this team will be fine. They'll do what they do. Now, Shaver mentioned too, not getting your two biggest rivals on that schedule is massive. Maybe they find a way to go 11-1 or find a way to get into that title game at the end of the year. Who knows? So conference
All right.
title game, not the national.
There is Penn State. Let's keep moving down. Let's go to Wisconsin. JP is taking us through Wisconsin, which is very interesting to consider that he's
Around.
probably one of the more hated teams in JP's mind. But JP, tell us about the Badgers this year.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to make any friends by wearing an Iowa shirt and having Iowa gear behind me as I'm talking about the Wisconsin Badgers. But I promise I'm doing this from a neutral perspective because this is the Big Ten, and I feel like I owe it to do this the correct way. So the offense last year, changing to the style that they were running with Phil Longo, dealt with a lot of injuries. And I think you could look at the skill position, you could look on the offensive line. There were injuries all over for this team, right? But they still found a way to run for over 160 yards per game, even though the air raid mantra, the air raid tag was thrown on them. This is still a team that wants to run the football and run it well. And when you have a guy like Ches Malusi, who hopefully can stay healthy, I legit think this is a team that could continue that trend. Now, losing Braylon Allen makes a difference, but it's a team that can still run the football really well. Tyler Van Dyke comes in from Miami. You might have heard the name a time or two. He's usually the guy they're talking about turning it over with some issues for Miami. A lot of blame was put on him. Was it his fault? Sometimes. Was it not? All the time. Like, it just kind of depended on what Tyler Van Dyke was showing up on Saturdays for the Hurricanes for the last couple of years. Braden Locke, though, a guy that played the second half of the year for Wisconsin, is still going to have a shot at this. It sounds like it's going to be Van Dyke's job, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see Locke show up in some snaps early in the year and really shine in some spots. Malusi, again, if he can stay healthy, I'm just going to touch on this again because I do think he is an underappreciated running back in the Big Ten. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be the featured guy. Tyway Walker, a kid that came in from Oklahoma, will also be probably that second back that they kind of lean on. And they got a load of freshmen that are talented that they're really high on there in Madison. Offensive line returns 3. I think that's a big deal. You talk Wisconsin, you talk the offensive line, right? They're traditionally very good at developing guys, much like in Iowa, but they've had more success running the football and continually winning football games with what their identity is. It should be another solid unit for them here. The wide receiver core here, headlined by Will Pauling. They bring back 3 of the top 5. I think outside of Will Pauling, you kind of look at this group and you're wondering who the second guy is going to be. For me, maybe Bryson Green's that guy. They don't have a stud tight end that they really love at this moment in time. Maybe Wisconsin finds a way to get the tight end more involved, and then they really take a step forward. I think that's one thing that's really missing for them. But offensively, it's year 2. You got a new quarterback in, I think, as a bridge guy to get to the younger guys that you have developing and kind of in the oven still. I think this can take a step forward. People kind of know what to expect out of them. They feel the identity. They're used to the system a little bit more. It's definitely a team that can take a step forward offensively. On the defense, again, Wisconsin, what do you think? You think a really good defense? They're going to have another good one. I think they'll be solid again. They'll take a step. Last year wasn't kind of the Wisconsin defense that people are used to seeing. Not that they were poor, but they weren't really as aggressive, and they didn't have the big play ability to get in on the quarterback that they've had in years past. The linebacking core built by the portal, I think it's one of the team's probably best unit. Tackett Curtis is fairly highly touted as a guy out of USC. He's going to be a sophomore this year, started is a true freshman for USC. I know that USC team wasn't very good defensively, but this kid is a gem for sure. Leon Lowry came in from Syracuse, a linebacker as well. These are two guys that are going to be very good and not the only names you need to know at linebacker. At the defensive back side of things, they bring back 7 of 8, including Ricardo Hallman. He's a third-team Big Ten guy, and then safety Hunter Waller. I think they like their DBs and what they had to do, and they could really lean on those guys to make plays down the field and create turnovers. Defensive line will be solid. They lost their top tackler. Assume the unit improves against the run. They weren't great a season ago, I think, giving up over almost 4 yards a carry. This is a team that's a no-name bunch kind of defensive line-ish. They are missing some big names there, but I do think this is a team that could really improve. A couple of players that I really think you should know: a William and Mary transfer, and John Pius. I think he'll have a chance to be in the first or second team Big Ten. And then offensive tackles Jack Nelson and Riley Molman. I make sure I said that right. These guys are 6'7" and 6'8" respectively, both pushing over 310 pounds. These are absolute units, and some of the best tackles you'll see in the Big Ten. I think they'll both go very high on draft day here in the coming years. So Wisconsin-wise, man, now your schedule doesn't do you any favors, but that's just kind of part of the new Big Ten. So hopefully we can find a way to, hopefully not against Iowa, obviously, but I think Wisconsin will find a way to get better on both sides of the football here in 2024. Does that show up in the win column? We'll have yet to see. I don't know if Van Dyke's quite the answer here, but I do think things are going the right way for Fickell, who I do really respect and wish he was in Iowa City.
A team that was picked to win the West in 2023, now looking to just take a step forward. Jake, what do you think on the Badgers this year?
Yeah, this is an interesting spot for Wisconsin. It feels like we've now, again, with no divisions, we're always usually talking about Wisconsin being a threat to win the West or kind of being at the top of the West. Is Tyler Van Dyke the missing piece for this air raid? I'm not really sure, and I don't know how much longer you can put an air raid system in Big Ten West style of football. I just don't know if there's a position to do that in this kind of league, but we'll have to wait and see. You're going to have a guy who throws the ball around a ton, sometimes to the other team too much, but I think he's a guy who you want in this spot if it's going to make it work. In Alabama, going to Madison, when I noticed this, looking at the schedule, is one of the weirder non-con matchups I've seen, just looking at the whole slate in general. I don't know how that would fare. I mean, you probably a 17 to 20 point underdog at home, and that's just weird to think of Wisconsin.
Reese, what do you think? You think Wisconsin takes a step forward from where they were last year, or do you think Fickell can really put it together and shock us all?
Somewhere in the middle. I think it's reasonable. I don't think they'll be
Fair.
as bad as they were last year. I think it's rather than make a drastic jump like that, especially in year 2. I think it's kind of crazy. But I mean, seeing them get back to being Wisconsin of a 7-8 win caliber program, I think is everything you need, because that's just a great stepping stone forward for what this program can be and what they hope to be with Fickell. So.
All right, let's go back down to Reese. Let's talk one of the new teams, the first new team that we've previewed within the Big Ten, and it's one that is very highly regarded going into the 2024 season, Dan Lanning's Oregon Ducks. Let's talk about them. Yeah,
talk about a team that's going to come into a conference and have a shot at winning this thing. Dan Lanning's got his 3rd season for this team, 22-5 record. They just doesn't show any signs of slowing down. Last year's team averaged 44 points a game and 530 yards a game. That's pretty good if you're keeping track at home. Now you lose Nix and your top running back and your top wide receiver, but you bring in a guy from Oklahoma by the name of Dylan Gabriel, who threw for 3,600 yards last year, 3 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. And you also bring in one of the best wide receivers in the portal, if not the best, in Evan Stewart. So you're adding a lot more speed outside to add on to this high-flying offense. And this could be one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, as you also bring back Tez Johnson, who's the second teamer last year with over 1,000 yards. And God forbid Gabriel goes down with injury, you also brought in a former 5-star right behind him in Dante Moore from UCLA. So we don't root for injuries, but if it even happens, I think they can be just fine because they brought in the dudes for the portal this year. And then what also makes this team so successful, how about you just dominate the line of scrimmage? You only get 5 sacks on the entire year, and you averaged 185 yards on the ground. That's pretty solid for that team. And you lose 2 all-conference guys on the line, but you bring in a guard from Indiana, and this whole line will have a combined 144 starts. So you're bringing in guys with some Power 4, Power 5 experience. And then this team is also ranked by Phil Steele as the number 3 offensive line in the country. And then defensively, you're coming into the Big Ten. I don't think this defense is going to have any issues, as they were pretty solid last year. You bring back 9 starters, and it's probably one of the best defenses this team's had in the past 10 years with defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoy. I believe that's how you say that guy's last name. He's got a history experience at Alabama under Saban as a defense coordinator for years as well too. You bring back one of your top linebackers too, and Jeffrey Bossa from Iowa. JP will recognize that name. And then this, like I said, the defense last year, they were tremendous at getting pressure on the quarterback. They had 34 sacks and really helped set the tone as well too. And then a new name that we all recognize on the show, but they got a guy from Washington by the name of Jabbar Muhammad to go into that secondary to be a little more experienced too. So expect him to make a big impact, especially when you're battling some of the big boys this year, like Ohio State when they come into town as well too. So, and then I think when you look at the schedule, they have 3 dates circled right away. You got Ohio State coming to town October 12th. November 2nd, you go to Michigan, and then November 3rd to 10th, you get Washington at home, and that's a team who beat them twice last year. So I think that's probably got the red marker out for what they want the most. And then this aside from Ohio State, I think this is probably everybody's kind of fan favorite team to win this conference. But then also when you look back at that schedule too, that Ohio State Oregon game in the regular season might be the biggest game, I think, in college football this season. If you look at the Texas-Michigan game, that's probably a big one as well too. But I think this is going to be one of the more interesting games and just fun games to like sit down and whatever's on that day, like that is going to be on your main TV because it's just going to be a lot of fun to watch. They also have some sneakier games too with like a Boise State, Michigan State. We don't really know what they're going to be like this year. A lot of people are high on them, but I don't know. Jonathan Smith has been a great coach at Oregon State before, so who knows what they're going to be like in year one with him. And then like the Wisconsin team that we just talked about as well too. So over under is set at 10.5. I think it's a good over to take, which is a lot to bet on this team. But again, it's not only because they went and got guys in the portal, which is awesome, cool, you can do that. But it's the fact that Dan Lanning has been so successful in getting these guys, and then they show success on the field that he unleashes their potential. It's not just getting names, but it's getting them to show that they deserve all the rankings and the playing time that they have.
Definitely one of the more talented teams on paper within the Big Ten this year. JP, I'll kind of change it up a little bit. What do you think about atmosphere-wise? Obviously, Audazen's big name stadium. They think it's a crazy place to play. Do you think they're in for a little bit of a shell shock when it comes to the Big Ten playing in November at night, and the Big Ten's a little bit different?
I think just the fan experience itself, like dealing with people from the Midwest rather than people from the Pacific Northwest or on the West Coast.
We're pretty nice.
I was going to say it might be a little bit different in that shock, but I think they've been in a couple tough environments and really felt that. Playing at Washington last year helps. I mean, when USC's popping up at that, yeah, like there's tough games you've played. For me, this team's always been, can you come up to the physicality of these teams that are above you that you've played? I think that's been Oregon's bugaboo. I mean, when Utah was a thorn in their side for quite a few years, and some other teams. So physicality, can you match it, and can you be that team? I think Dan Lanning is the guy to make that team. I mean, 3rd year in it, he should be able to make this team a little more physical and a little more prone to getting in those dogfights.
Jake, quickly, your thoughts on the Ducks?
Well, Athlon has their non-conference schedule completely wrong, by the way. If you have an Athlon magazine,
Athlon's a little bit of a second-tier magazine. They have a few listings that are wrong out there.
Not even close to being right. But with this team, I think it's the most complete team in the conference. I'm really high on this team. You get guys like Cam Alexander from UTSA in the secondary who might be a backup to Jabbar Muhammad, or you get a guy like Kobe Savage from Kansas State to play the safety position. I really like this team. It's just a matter of how elite can Dylan Gabriel be, but we've said it 100 times before. Maybe it's just a wait and see, because I think that's a lot of scenarios with these quarterbacks in 2024. But yeah, we'll talk about Oregon, I think, more as we go on.
All right, there's the Ducks. Let's keep moving down the line. Moves to me. We get to talk about Maryland a little bit. The Terps are a fun one to look at, but obviously one big question lingers in everybody's mind, and that's who's going to play quarterback to replace the shoes of Taulia Tagovailoa. And they went out and got a decent one in quarterback MJ Morris from NC State. He should be a nice dual threat look for you to kind of match Taulia. I don't want to say he's up to his caliber, because he had a record-setting year last year that led the Terps to most of their success. He should be okay. I mean, he threw for over 1,300 yards in his time at NC State, looking for a new home, but I don't want people to write off looking into this team a little bit deeper. I think Billy Edwards Jr. is a plausible second option, a good depth piece here. He was the Music City Bowl MVP in 2023, and I think he's going to there's going to be a competition for this job. And I don't think a lot of people they're kind of just writing in MJ Morris because he's kind of that run and gun quarterback that Mike Loxley likes. But I think Billy Edwards Jr. has something to say about it, and you might see him on the field. In the backfield, they bring back Roman Hemby, who kind of had a staggered 2023 because of the stat line that Taulia put up. He had over 1,200 yards in 2022, looking to kind of get that footing back with a new quarterback at the helm that not all of the offensive production works through. Colby McDonald will split time with him. It should be a good 1-2 punch either way with either quarterback or either running back. On the O-line, this is where they had to replace some pieces, and I thought they did a decent job. Loxley's a pretty good recruiter in going to do so. They bring in Alu Ba from Georgia. He's an IMG Academy guy, so you know he's played good competition, and he'll be ready to go. Josh Kaltenberger from Purdue, he'll play center for him. And then at tackle, they brought in Alan Heron, who went to Shorter University, which is a D2 school, looking to make a splash in Power 4 football. So a little bit of a question mark maybe with the D2 guy, but from a Georgia and Purdue transfer, those are two schools that like to run the ball or at least have good talent. So it should be even, if not a step up on the offensive line. So they're looking to ground and pound again. On the outside, the one name I want to highlight, Caden Prather. He's a West Virginia transfer. He played at Maryland last year even, and he led the Big Ten in yards per reception. He was 15.9 yards per reception, so a really good downfield threat for the Terps here. And they also have a couple other guys coming back, so they have talent at the skill positions, just looking for that line to fill in, and they should have another successful year on offense. On the defensive side of the ball, you bring back 6 of 11 starters. You're really experienced up front with Fuller, Phillips, and Aking Basote. I said that right. I looked that up. So stick that one in your pipe, Mark.
Oh, yeah.
Then the DBs to fill in. They went out and got a really good transfer. He'll go alongside Lionel Whitaker, who was a good player for them last year, played in 11 games, was more than serviceable. Like JP mentioned earlier, is a great point. In the Big Ten, it's not like the end of the world if you don't have a breakdown DB room. Like, you can get away with it. So I think they'll be fine. But the transfer they brought in was a Bowling Green transfer, and Jalen Husky. He was all MAC first team. So that's a nice addition for them on the back end. And I expect them to take a step forward on the defensive side of the ball too. Wrapping everything up, looking at their schedule, it's tough. You play conference game in week 2. Then you have very serviceable non-con games, but your toughest games, you go play at Oregon, you host Iowa, and then to end the year, you get to go to Happy Valley and play in probably a nightmare, if it's anything like College Football 25 atmosphere, if you're a Maryland Terrapin fan. So that's what I have on the Terps. We'll go to Jake first. Jake, anything that sticks out to you for the Terps in 2024?
Yeah, I think it's a big chance for Roman Hemby to be a top 5 running back in this conference this year. I want to see him take another step, and I just think that Maryland's got an underrated defense compared to the rest of the Big Ten. I think that this is another team that just keeps winning 7 games, man, and I don't think we give Loxley enough credit to be consistent in the Big Ten, and especially when he was in the East. Like, it's really hard to come by wins, and I think that this team is going to take another step with the no divisions. I think Maryland can even make a bigger jump with NIL and things like that. So I like where this program's sitting at right now.
I feel like it's one of those teams that's going to have like a Shiano 07 breakout year. Like, it's just coming. They're so talented. Like, one of these 10-win random Maryland seasons got to be coming, right, JP?
Maybe it's possible. I think nobody's happier than the end of divisions than Maryland, and Maryland, Indiana, Penn State. All 3 of those from the East are probably all thinking pretty happy.
Yeah.
This is a really good receiving core. I think just talking or hearing, I wasn't personally talking to Mike Loxley, but hearing him talk about the receiving core, I think he likes this team 1 through 3 more than he's liked a lot of his receiving cores. He's had better receivers at Maryland. He hasn't had a 1, 2, 3 like this, and that's coming from him. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle things in the schedule that kind of plays out for them to start the year. Get hot and see what happens, right? Like, you can't fumble early. I think if they can get to 5-1, 6-0, and really feel good about themselves, that changes the course of the season quick.
I feel like that's kind of Maryland football, though. As a Big Ten guy, haven't you felt like over the last few years, you look at week 5 in Oregon, Maryland's 4-1 or 5-1, and then they're playing Ohio State, and then it all just kind of slides, and then they win 7, and they end up going 7-5 and winning the bowl game.
It's very seeable this year with the start of their schedule, and then you end the last 4 games at Oregon, Rutgers at home, Iowa at home, at Penn State. I
think the there. I think they 7-5, like that 6-6 is like where I really think they'll be. But I think 8-4 would be a long shot, but they can do it. They can do it. That would be a great year for Loxley's squad. Reese, any thoughts on the Terps quickly?
I just want to address the allegations of people that are going to be saying it. JP and I, we did not attend Shorter University that running back came from. We did not.
Yeah, no, that's a real university. I had to double
Wow.
check that because it just said former school. It
We're
said
coming out and
Shorter. I
facing it
was
right
like,
away, JP. Me and you
what?
together, brother.
So D2 transfer is always interesting.
We
but
got
good
some
point there.
alum in the chat today.
I like that clear up. But all right, let's keep moving down the line. Let's go back to Jake. Jake previewing another new addition team, and that is the Washington Huskies. Played in the national championship last year. Tell us about this team.
Yeah, I talked about it today or earlier in the show when I watched Media Days. Jed Fish was the one that really caught my eye. I thought I don't have a ton of information on Jed Fish. He kind of came out of the woodworks. It felt like last year when Arizona kind of had that last half of the season run that they did. But now he's taken over a team that was in the national championship last year, but this will not be even recognizable to that 2023 Washington team. In fact, they bring back 0 starters offensively, which makes you think, is this team going to, he said it basically, it's not a rebuild, it's a reboot. It was his exact quote today. So is it going to be a reboot where maybe they get 8 wins, which I think would be a successful year? Or is this going to be your 2023 TCU team that misses a bowl game after making the college football national championship? We'll have to wait and see, but I think Fish got one of his wins early by keeping Will Rogers. Will Rogers commits to Kalen DeBoer after leaving Mississippi State. Once he hears DeBoer is going to Alabama, I think DeBoer was even trying to take him with, but he stays. He entered the portal, and Fish got him to stay there. So that was a huge win for them. I'm just wondering, Rogers has always been a part of an air raid system, and last year was his first year not being a part of that, and Zach Arnett kind of messed with him. He got hurt, obviously, but I think a little bit mentally kind of hindered him a little bit. So how does he adjust not being in an air raid offense again this year? But the entire offensive line is brand new. I mentioned that before. That's just a huge question mark to me, and that concerns me a lot. The continuity and the camaraderie of an entirely new offensive line, I just don't think that can be fixed in one fall camp. But we'll have to wait and see. On the other side, I think they got some skill position guys. Jonah Coleman was almost a 1,000-yard rusher last year. He comes with Fish. From Arizona over to Washington. That's going to be nice to rely on if you're Rodgers and if you're Fish calling plays. And then they got Jeremiah Hunter, who was Cal's #1 receiver basically the last 2 years. So they got some guys who have experience. It's just like I said, coming together. Can they click in spring ball and in fall camp to really get this thing going? Defensively, I think is super, super interesting. Steve Belichick. Yeah, that you heard that name right. Bill's son comes over from the Patriots to be the defensive coordinator this year. He has no college experience. And how does that translate? Well, again, in that interview that I heard with Fish today, he said that he was going to get an NFL defensive coordinator or an NFL coach, no matter who he hired. It didn't even matter if it was Belichick. He talks to Harbaugh a lot. That was the blueprint for them when they were really good at Michigan. He had NFL experience. So maybe Belichick does a nice job. You know, we have the helmet earpieces this year. Maybe this is very, very easily transparent between NFL and college now than it has been in years past. It's really not going to matter, though. Washington ranked 96 in total defense last year, and they're 46 in returning production. So I don't think they could get much worse. And I do think Belichick is actually going to make Washington a better defense. Looking at the tea leaves in the future, down the road, even if this year doesn't go as well as Washington fans would want, they're 5th right now in the Big Ten in recruiting in their 2025 class. They have 7 4-stars, and they're recruiting at a really, really high level for Washington's sake. So if this year you get 5 or 6 wins, I think you take your lumps. You have enough guys to be feasible and be competitive, but the future is bright, I think, for Jed Fish, and I think he's got good coaches that back him up too.
All right, there is the Washington Huskies in 2024. Jake, that was good. However, what's your record prediction? Do you think they're going to get to 8? Like that, I feel like a defending national champion, you want to at least get to 8.
I think, well, don't you? I just mentioned, is this the 2023 TCU team? Isn't your goal to, with an entirely new roster,
Right?
Don't you just want to make a bowl game going into a new league too? Like the circumstances are really unprecedented. We really haven't seen this with the transfer portal era. Everybody's leaving, and now you're on top of that. You got to throw in going into one of the best Power 4 leagues in the country. I think asking for 6 wins isn't asking too much. You still play the Apple Cup. You got to travel across country to Rutgers as your first road game. So that's a tall task. You go to Iowa, you go to Penn
That's
State.
such a long trip, dude.
Yeah, they
Just gotta wait a- Oh my
UCLA has a
Longitudinals.
super long road trip as far as total miles in a season, but Washington's not far behind them. So they got to deal with the travel too.
college football in 2024. JP, your thoughts on the Huskies?
I think the schedule does them no favors. I mean, this is ranked the 21st hardest schedule on Phil Steele's rankings here. I worry about the trenches on both sides. And if you want to just reset and work to get in a bowl game with a schedule like this, it's got to be better on the offensive and defensive line. And I'm just not sure if they're there yet.
Reese, quickly, your thoughts, predictions for Washington.
Yeah, it's hard to see a team reboot this much. Hopefully, they don't got to reboot and rally, but we'll see what they're going to be like this year with your new head coach. You have the good quarterback in Will Rogers, so if he can find a way to stay healthy, because if he goes down, then I think a bowl game is going to be hard to get to. But if he can stay healthy, I don't think it'd be crazy to get to 6 or 7 for this team, because I mean it is still Washington, and they do have that name where I think they fall to like a 5 or 4 win season at all. I think they still maintain a bowl game at least.
All right, let's move on to the next team. Let's go up to JP. JP is going to take us through the reigning national champion Michigan Wolverines. JP, tell us about this team.
Yeah, let's talk Michigan here in 2024. Obviously, a little bit of a different look now that Sharon Moore is the head guy there in Ann Arbor. No more J.J. McCarthy, no more Blake Corum. There are some big names that aren't there anymore, but this is still a team that's very, very, very excited about the 2024 season. I think they're excited where they are as a program. I mean, the way they've recruited, the way they've kind of identified themselves and found exactly who this program is and what they want to do. It goes a long ways in college football. So they actually get the 15th hardest schedule. According to Phil Steele. I mean, that's not really what you want to see with the new look Big Ten after a national title year. I mean, but that's what happens when you bring Fresno State as a G5 and then you bring Texas into the Big House. Those are 2 tough games to start the year. I also want to talk about the new offensive coordinator, Kirk Campbell. I don't think anything is going to change to what their identity is. Don't expect this to completely changed. I mean, Sharon Moore's a guy who literally ran the ball, 40 times in a row last year against Penn State. Wouldn't be surprised if they continue that trend and really stay on the ground. Just, offensively, despite the, transfers and the handful of guys that leave, they'll need a reset. But I think the talent drop is expected. Don't expect this to just stay where it was, right? Especially if you go to the quarterback room where this is still, some people are saying a 5-guy race. I think it's more of a 3. Alex Orji, Davis Warren, and Jack Tuttle, 3 guys are still all battling for that quarterback spot. Wouldn't be surprised if they all get a little shake and a chance to play in the first couple games of the year. Obviously, with Texas in week 2, you'd like to have a guy settled in and ready to start that game. We'll see how Sharon Moore does that. Doesn't seem like he is going to tell anybody to play his cards pretty close to his chest here. Donovan Edwards returns. Not the year he wanted to have in 23, I would say. I think he wanted to be more around a feature, closer to the feature guy, not splitting carries right down the middle with Corum. But then he really took off in the college football playoff. If you look at the national title game, he just kind of found his stride and really took off. A really likable guy that is still a talented running back behind an offensive line who's going to be super solid, right? This is where the biggest question marks that I feel like are going to be in the receiving room and on the offensive line. I think they'll be fine at offensive line. They're just going to have to really replace some guys. They've lost 6 offensive linemen that played games last year, all left. Like whether that's transfer, whether that's graduation, whether that's the NFL early, 6 guys leave. They're going to bring in guys through the portal, and then guys they have on campus, they're still super confident in. So don't expect it to be a massive drop off, but don't expect it to be an elite Joe Moore award-winning offensive line here in 2024. 3 of your top 4 pass catchers leave as well. I think Colston Loveland, the tight end, is going to be probably their easiest option to really rely on. He's a really talented guy. And I think Tyler Morris should be a top guy at the receiver position. It's just, you really need those guys on the outside to be just difference makers. You need to have the vertical threat ability, and I'm not sure they have that right now. Maybe they don't need it. Maybe they could just kind of lean on the run game, because Orji does bring, if he gets the nod, he does bring a different dynamic than J.J. McCarthy with a little more of a physical build, running the football downhill. Defensively, I think this is where a lot of people are looking at Michigan and be like, why would the drop-off be that big? Because it's going to be that good of a defense again. They lose 3 starters on the defensive line, but good news is that Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are both back on the interior. Those are the 2 best defensive tackles in the country, you could say. I mean, it's definitely the best combo in the country. Those 2 are absolute studs, and they're super high on the guys that they got around them at defensive end and other spots. So Ann Arbor shouldn't see that much of a drop on the defensive line. The linebacking core loses 3 starters, but benefits from a depth from a season ago. They played a lot of guys through this group. Ernest Hausman and Maryland transfer Jay Sean Burnham. Those are 2 guys are going to fill in very nicely for this team, and I'm really excited to watch to see how they work defense like this. Will Johnson's going to lock down an entire side of the field, if I'm being completely honest with you, at corner. And I think the other guys is where you're going to have to find some spots, whether that's a safety or corner. The other DB slots are really going to have to step up. And that's just how things go in 2024. When you have that many seniors and that many guys ready for the NFL, you're going to have to reload some spots. And there's going to be some that you're a little more questionable than others. So Michigan's still going to be very good. I wouldn't expect a drop to like 7 wins. I think that's a little crazy, but to see them at 9, 10 is very realistic with a schedule like this and what they're dealing with offensively in the reset. So 2 guys I just want to mention quickly. Khalil Mullins, I think, is going to be the number 2 back for them. He's going to get the kind of Donovan Edwards treatment where he's going to be the second guy getting the carries while Edwards is the workhorse this year. And then Wesley Walker at free safety, Georgia Tech and Tennessee transfer. He's a guy they're hoping really steps up and fills some of those holes on the back end.
Yeah, quick shout out to Ernest Hausman, Nebraska transfer. You win your national title, maybe time to come on home. Maybe you went out and got yours now. Come on back. It's a fun story. Look it up. He put up like 20 tackles against him as a true freshman and then transfers there and wins a national title and starts for him. So shout out Ernest. But Jake, what do you think on the defending national champs?
Yeah, JP highlighted it really well. The only thing I want to see is Donovan Edwards needs a Robin if he is Batman, so to say. And Khalil Mullins is a guy that needs to take that step up and honestly probably be better than what Donovan Edwards was last year in that spot, because I'm not so sure if Donovan Edwards can be what Blake Corum was last year, getting 25, 30 carries. So they're going to need a second and third option at running back, because I don't really care what happens with Orji. I think people feel pretty comfortable with where they're at with him. So
Reese, any thoughts on Michigan?
I don't know. It's hard to think of this team. You lose your most valuable weapon in Connor Stallion. So what are they really going to be like this year? You know?
Did you guys hear there's a documentary coming out about
Reese?
Oh, yeah, there is. Yeah.
What a quick turn.
I'm so glad I stayed on Michigan last year. Like, just not being the national championship team. Like, I was like, I didn't think the scandal was ever going to push them aside. Like, this team just bullies and manhandles you. And I'm glad they prove people wrong, because it just, maybe we can talk about that another day. That's just such a stupid allegation.
We'll see if they can put it together even with helmet cams here in college football. But all right, let's go 1 hour and 4 minutes down the road to East Lansing. Reese, tell us about Michigan State this year.
Well, it's crazy. I get another team with a new head coach and a new quarterback too. You get Jonathan Smith from Oregon State, and then he brings his former 4-star quarterback with him in Aiden Childs. He's a dual threat guy, and while he didn't get starts last year because he still had DJU ahead of him, he still got plenty of decent playing time. And again, he's coming with this head coach, so he's going to be kind of in a system where he's going to be more familiar with it. So again, expect less growing pains, I think, earlier in the year. And they also bring in a first team, an independent, and you get to be a first team or independent from UMass by a guy by the name of Kayron Lynch Adams. And if we know anything about Jonathan Smith and when he's successful, it's because they have a good running game as well too. Like, they had Damian Martinez to go along with DJU too. And they also have a guy they bring back in the backfield by the name of Nathan Carter, who had 300-yard games last year with that offense. Who really struggled. So look for them to have a solid running game again too this year, which is going to help out Childs as well. And I think the biggest question for this team, though, is going to be their offensive line. You lose 4 or 5 starters, and you only have a combined 31 starts between the guys you are expected to play this year too. So a new quarterback and a solid running back ain't going to be able to do a whole lot if there aren't holes up front, and the quarterback can't stand up for the entire game if he's running out of the pocket and has to make errant throws. And then defensively, we got a new defensive coordinator by a guy named Joe Ross, who comes over from Minnesota. Before that was a defensive coordinator at Rutgers. He's got to try to attempt to help out this defense, who didn't do as great last year. They have 28 points a game and almost 400 yards a game as well too. They do bring back 10 starters via the portal. So on paper, you would expect to see some results. But again, did you bring in the right guys, or did you just bring in a higher number of guys, quality versus quantity? And then diving into their schedule too, I think this team may have one of the hardest schedules in the conference too. Phil still ranks it as 22. you have a little bit of a murderer's row in the middle of your conference. If you're talking about going up against some solid defenses, you get Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, and Michigan all in a row. And if you do not have a healthy team or a healthy quarterback come then, it's going to be tough sledding. So let's hope that offensive line can get it figured out so that way Childs can at least have some success when he gets to be those games. And if they can get healthy, I think it's a stretch. If they get to 6 wins, I think it's a successful year. Their over-unders at 4.5. You can get the over. I think it's for like minus 150, 155, something like that. So I think it's a good bet to take, but to see them getting to 7, I think is a stretch, but I could reasonably see them getting to 6. But again, you just have got to stay healthy during that stretch because that is a rough, or at least they have a bye week in between Oregon and Iowa, but it's like that is one of the tougher stretches in college football, I think.
Yeah, that's a fair point to make. I think Noah Kim last year was a little bit of a spark for Michigan State before he went down with an injury, and he kind of has a similar play style to Aiden Childs, but with a new head coach and a new scheme, we'll see how they fit. JP, any thoughts on the Spartans?
Yeah, I think they're a year or two away from a bowl game, just seeing how Jonathan Smith builds programs and where they're at with a lot of key positions. So I think Childs is a really good quarterback, but they are multiple positions away from bowl game contention, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Jake.
Yeah, you just, I mean, even on it's the line that's really going to be the separator this year. And I think that's why they're going to come up short. I mean, Derek Harmon and Joe both transfer out post spring, 2 4-star defensive linemen. It's just a big loss for them. And I think they're going to struggle in the trenches, but I like the hire. And I think, yeah, this is more of a project than a turnaround in 1 year.
All right, there is the Michigan State Spartans. Let's go to our last full team preview, and I get to talk a little bit about USC, another newcomer in the conference. And Lincoln Riley had some interesting comments at Big Ten Media Days talking about how he never really sees USC as a middle of the pack team. He always thinks they're going to be competing at the top. And it always seems that these Big Ten schools have these coaches, including my own, that come in and at Big Ten Media Days their first year make some big statements. You can make those statements when you're Lincoln Riley and you've had a top 8 offensive scoring offense in your first 7 years as a head coach. Every year, they're a top 8 scoring offense in America, but he's got some pieces to replace here this year. You obviously lose Caleb Williams, the number 1 draft pick in the NFL draft, the Chicago Bears. Who will he be replaced by? Well, you have redshirt junior quarterback Miller Moss, who only had 6 touchdowns and 372 yards in the air in the Holiday Bowl. So you got to feel good about your room. And then in the transfer portal, you bring in all of UNLV's offensive production and Jaden Mavia. He is a very good second option for this offense if Miller Moss were to go down, or they might even split time because Mavia is that talented. In the backfield, you bring in a pretty good running back in Jaquavion Weeks. He's from Mississippi State, and he had over 1,200 yards receiving in his 4 years at Mississippi State. So he's got a ton of experience, and he gives you a little spread them out look that I'm sure Lincoln Riley will utilize. On the outside, you definitely lose some talent, but you retain probably your biggest and youngest piece in Zachariah Branch, who is the most electric punt returner and kick returner in college football. I expect him to take a step up in the wide receiver room this year and play more of an impact his second year in college football. But everybody wants to talk about the defense at USC. And this has been the lingering problem in this program and why they've stayed away from the top and all these championship appearances that they're supposed to have. You finally get rid of Alex Grinch and you revamp this defensive coaching room. You bring in Coach Lynn from UCLA, who had a hell of a defense last year. He takes UCLA from the 87th overall off defense in the country to the 11th. And they're competitive, man. He made that school competitive on defense when they really were lost in their ways too. They also go and pluck the head coach from one of the best FCS programs in recent history in North Dakota State, and Matt Eintz. And he was going to coach linebackers there. And then, we got to coach a secondary too. Why don't you get a former Houston head coach who's now a Power 4 school in Doug Belk, and he'll coach the secondary. So you've got the coaching pieces there now, but I don't know if they replaced or went out and got enough talent, a step above talent on the defensive side of the ball to make the jump they need to. They might have a better scheme, and a step forward is very minimal for this program because you gave up 30 or more points in 8 games last year. But you bring back Bear Alexander, you get Gentry back and Arnold back, but there wasn't really a portal edition that jumps off the page for USC where it's all right, this is going to be the guy they're going to center around. So it's more of a scheme fit. They're going to they'll be better on defense than under Grinch, but I don't know if it'll be enough to be competitive in a power league like the Big Ten. So looking at their schedule, it's not there for them. They're the third toughest schedule in the country, according to Phil Steele. I mean, they lead it off with LSU in Vegas. That's a rude awakening sometimes if you're trying to kind of establish a new identity on defense. But USC, a lot of question marks, but I think they have the skill positions kind of locked down as Lincoln Riley always does. Jake, what do you think on USC?
I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about
Really?
this team. I'm optimistic about this defense. I think they're really
Really?
happy to keep Bear Alexander around. You know, we talked about it last year. He was like a question mark. He's made like 3 stops in 3 years. So
Yeah, we literally posted that he was going
Ye-
to transfer again.
yeah. So to keep him as a huge win, I think he's going to be awesome. They got 4 4-star transfers on the defensive side. Those transfers on the defense, they got like 7 guys who had started, I think, power 4 level. You got the Kamari Ramsey kid, comes over with Lynn from UCLA. Nate Clifton started at Vanderbilt a little bit. And then you mentioned it, Parks. The entire coaching staff on the defensive side had defensive coordinator or head coaching experience. Lynn turned that UCLA defense from like 87th to 11th in 1 year. Now, I don't think it's going to be that drastic, but I think this is a step in the right direction. It's just too bad the schedule is just absolutely crazy.
It's daunting.
I think
yeah.
this could be a dark horse, I think, if the schedule wasn't so brutal for them.
Yeah. How many times have we talked about USC trying to be in that mix, though? So maybe they need the dark horse play to finally put it all together. JP, what do you think on the Trojans their first year in?
Lincoln Riley was pretty confident in how he was completely switching up kind of how they're running the defense and how they're running practices to get more physical and kind of handle things a little bit better. Again, this is the same with a lot of these teams in these conferences. I just want to see it and what it really looks like because it's an identity change in some spots, and that's not as easy to do as you think it might be, even if you are bringing in transfers.
Reese, what do you think? You're a guy who was big on Zachariah Branch last year. You think he steps forward in the wide receiver room?
I think he'll be fine. It's just if he has a quarterback that can manage to throw him the ball and not turn it over. But you talk about this defense, I think it's their biggest question mark. You have Lincoln Riley, who this guy has. He's got what 3 Heisman winning quarterbacks under his belt too. So that guy's going to be just fine on offense. Is like, can we finally adjust the narrative of you not having a solid defense? And with this being the year and getting your defensive coordinator who's had success he's had in the past. So.
Okay, I'm going to throw this take at you, and maybe I should save this for hot takes. No, I'm going to save it for hot takes, actually, but it's on USC. So,
jeez, man.
All right, I know, sorry. But let's cover 6 teams in 6 minutes. That is our full conference preview on teams like individually, full-time, but we're going to cover 6 teams in 6 minutes, just brief points about them. JP has covering 2. Reese is covering 1. I'm covering 1. Jake also has 2. So there are your 6, and they are made up of UCLA, the remaining teams, Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, Northwestern. So let's cover those all. Let's lead it off with JP. Then we'll go down to Reese and then Jake for his 2, and I'll round it out as the last one. I got the timer up and ready.
We're going 2 straight?
Yes, you'll go back to back. Just roll.
Give me like a hand or something.
Clarification.
Yeah.
What?
Good clarification. I like that.
All right.
But all right, let's go 6 teams in 6 minutes. JP, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'm going to start off with the Indiana Hoosiers here. This is actually just JMU moved to the Big Ten. Now, Curt Cignetti comes in as a really good hire for Indiana. I think they're super confident in what he has to do. He's coming to the rescue with an army of transfers, and not just from JMU. 15 projected starters for the Hoosiers this season will be transfers. I think one of them headlined by Curtis Rourke, Ohio's former quarterback, who's super solid, was looked at a lot of draft boards the season ago at Ohio. Didn't have the year he was looking for. He also couldn't stay as healthy as he would have liked. Weapons in the running back room like Black, wide receivers, Sarrett, Horton, and Miles Cross, formerly of Ohio as well. These are guys that are all going to really help this team take a step forward offensively, and I think will really improve this Indiana team. Defensively, they're going to be improved as well. It's just how these Sun Belt players really adjust to playing in the Big Ten and tougher schedules, tougher teams, and just a different style of ball, I think is the big thing here. Guys to watch that you really want to pay attention to, James Carpenter, Mikael Kamara on the defensive line. I think those are 2 legitimate studs there. And the secondary is going to be the very, very veteran group. Opportunity for a bowl for Indiana, honestly, if you look at the schedule, it's going to be a tough grind to it, but 5-6 wins is a real possibility. I don't think anybody in Indiana would really be batting an eye if they got to 5 or 6 this season. So I like the hire with Cignetti, and I'm really looking forward to see what he can do in the Big Ten here in the future. Next to Northwestern, David Braun pretty much proved everybody wrong a season ago, winning 7 football games and going to a bowl game. Their win total right now sits at 4.5. This is not a team that I'm super high on this year. And I don't necessarily think that's just because I'm tired of playing them in the Big Ten West. I don't have to do that anymore, but I just don't see a lot of the talent that I've seen in years past in certain spots. The defense has always been a no-name bunch, but they've had a couple guys that you really want to remember. You remember a Brandon Joseph guy who's really talented on the back end. They had not too long ago. They really don't have a guy like that right now. Mike Wright will play quarterback, a former Vanderbilt quarterback, very dual threat. Definitely runs it better than he throws it around the yard. I'm not sure how that quite fits into things yet, but the new offensive coordinator and Zach Lugin from South Dakota State comes in. He is going to implement things to get the ball to playmakers in space. So maybe that'll just hit perfectly for Mike Wright and this team. The playmakers are going to have to come alive. I'm not sure. 8 return on the defense, like I was saying, bulk of it being a linebacker and defensive line. I just got to see the talent kind of uptick here. So star power is lacking, but I do think Northwestern will struggle here in the coming years. It's tough for them to win in this conference nowadays.
Illinois, jump over to Champaign. They're kind of looking to reclaim some of that glory they had in 22 when you almost go into Michigan and beat them on the road. And to help out, you bring back your quarterback, Luke Altmaier. And while he struggled last year, Brett Bielema, their head coach, is confident in this guy. They're saying he is saying that he's one of the most improved players on this team, which you'd hope so. He is your quarterback. But their issue early on is they're going to be one-dimensional, I think, as they plan on kind of having a 3-headed monster in the backfield as they lose 3 of their top 4 pass catchers from last year. So you're going to have some issues finding out who your guy is out wide, especially if you're going to have Altmaier, who maybe has the early struggles like you had last year. So if you're going to run the ball a lot, I think it's going to be easy for teams to kind of figure you out. But they do have an experienced offensive line. They bring 3 guys back, and they got some solid guys in the portal to kind of plug in those issues they may have had. And then defensively, they're going to be a little bit weaker up front. But defensive coordinator Aaron Henry is very confident in their back 7. He thinks it's about some of the best in the conference. And if we remember this team in 2022, the defense was probably one of the best part of that team. They just had a whole bunch of success, and they just had a little bit of a backslide last year. So I think reasonably you're just looking for any improvements here. Your over-runners at 5.5. And then your schedule-wise, you catch Kansas State, Penn State, Nebraska, Michigan, and Oregon. So they have some tough ones in there. They can find a way to win your coin flip games with the rest of the teams, kind of those middle teams in the conference. I don't think a bowl game is out of the question. They can get to one again this year and just try to find a way to manage some success.
Let's talk about UCLA. Hopefully my speech goes better than Deshaun Foster's opening press conference. But no, I really like this hire. Deshaun Foster is a late hire after Chip Kelly takes the offensive coordinator job at Ohio State, which I failed to mention before. But Foster is making some moves, especially in his coaching staff. He goes out and this is one of the more abstract hires that I've seen in college football. He goes in and brings in Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator, who is the coordinator for the Chiefs. I just think he's worked with Patrick Mahomes. He's worked under Andy Reid. I love that hire for him. He's also managed to keep some important pieces on offense, including quarterback Ethan Garbers, who was more of kind of a 1B option, but he's going to take the reins this year. JT Harden at running back is going to be nice, and JaMychal Struven, another good position at wide receiver. So they've got some threats. DeAnton Lynn leaves for the defensive coordinator spot at USC, and he promotes his defensive line coach in Ike Malloy. This was huge because he retained defensive tackle Jay Toa, and that was huge just to keep him away when Texas was going hard after him. Let's move on to Purdue so we can try to cut the 6 minutes here. This is everybody's favorite to being last in the Big Ten, but what can they do in Ryan Walters' second year? Hudson Card returns, which is huge. You keep him back, but his receivers are predominantly transfers. Some guys from Georgia, Florida Atlantic guy. So how can that translate? Can Card get them adjusted in fall camp right away? The defense looks to take a step forward with Walters' background. You look at a guy like Kydron Jackson. This was a guy who needs to take a step up at the edge rusher position because Nick Scorton goes to Texas A&M. This is a guy who they're going to be relying on in Jackson to get a ton of pressure on Big Ten quarterbacks. I like the secondary. They have some nice pieces. The Thieneman kid was a preseason first-team all-conference guy, according to Athlon. So there's pieces to work around in Ryan Walters' second year.
All right, looking at Minnesota fans, sorry to tell you, but you have a 2.5 win total for good reason. You lose Callie McManus in conference, and you bring in an FCS transfer, Max Brosmer, who led the FCS in passing, so maybe you'll have a different look. Your backfield, it's there. Darius Taylor, if he can stay healthy, he led the Big Ten in rushing the first month of the season, kind of gets injury-ridden throughout the rest of the year. So keeping him healthy is imperative to finding any sort of success on offense. Obviously, the biggest name and the player you wanted to keep around is Daniel Jackson, all Big Ten second team last year, looking to take a step forward, and you got him a quarterback that can throw him the ball. The offensive line needs to improve, and it's tough when your head coach comes out and even in Big Ten media days today talks about how you're not a program centered around NIL, which isn't the end of the world, but you're Minnesota. So maybe throwing some money at some guys on the offensive side of the ball would help you score more points because you struggled to last year, a majority of the year. The defense, you bring in a new defensive coordinator and Rutgers former linebacker coach Corey Heatherman. He should be, I don't want to say a step up, but you fell off last year. You give up 6 points in your first game or 10 points in your first game and 6 points in your second game. And then you started giving up a whole bunch of points everywhere. So you're looking to take a step forward on defense, but the offense is kind of going to be your bright spot. Schedule wise, it doesn't really work out for you. Past your 2 non-conference opponents in Rhode Island and Nevada, there's not a ton of wins here. You go play on the road at Michigan, you play on the road at Wisconsin, and you open the season against a North Carolina team that's looking to make a statement. So it's going to be tough sledding, which I don't think JP cares about because he's not a Minnesota fan, but we have PJ Fleck on this show. When we zoom back out, you'll see him, and it's going to be a rough sled for him. So that's the Minnesota Golden Gophers in 2024. But all right, that's 6 teams in 7 minutes and 50 seconds. Went a little long, but
I got
there's 18 teams here, guys.
I got everybody's splits down if we want to hear it afterwards.
Oh, mine was definitely the worst.
Ooh, what was mine? What was mine?
Mine had to have been close.
We'll clock it. So I got JP's first one was a minute 13. Second one was a minute 17. Reese's was a minute.
That wasn't that good, no.
Reese was a minute 30.
Ooh.
My first one was a minute 7. My second one, I tried to keep it short, got it at 52 seconds. Parks, you rounded us out with a minute 45 there.
Oh,
he did not. No way. Parks got a minute 45.
That doesn't sound right. That sounds like jank. And don't forget the 2 seconds it took to transfer from Reese to Jake too, because he was getting his phone
He was at a minute 40 there.
Yeah, add that stoppage. But all right, that's 6 teams in 7 minutes and 50 seconds. If you want us to deep dive your team, post to us on the comments right now and like the video. By the way, I haven't even said that yet, but like the video. It helps us a ton. Hit the subscribe button right now. And shout out to our partners at No Rivals. Before we go into conference championship predictions, 2 more Big Ten teams coming to No Rivals. We'll tell you, it's Iowa and Michigan State coming mid-August. Obviously, Iowa is a big one. JP will be decked out in No Rivals caps for the Hawkeyes. And then Michigan State fans, he got a new head coach. Might as well get a new cap to match him. So look out for those. Shop No Rivals, code PTFS when you check out for free shipping. And that is the partner plug. Shout out to the team at No Rivals. But let's go to conference championship game picks and predictions, round the clock style. Not too quick, but decently quick. JP, lead us off.
I'm going to take Ohio State, Penn State here. I think this is, I think Oregon, I don't want to see it before they jump into the Big Ten and kind of get physical with everybody else. So Michigan's not quite there yet. I'll take Ohio State, Penn State due to the schedule Penn State gets.
All right. There is a kind of shocking prediction. Let me just slide mine in, but I think Oregon and Ohio State are too talented. Give me Oregon and Ohio State in the Big Ten title. I think Ohio State wins it, and they'll head as the number 1 overall seed into the college football playoff. Jake, who do you got winning the Big Ten?
Michigan and Ohio State have won this conference the last 7 years, and this is a chalky conference. I'm always trying to be abstract in my picks. I'm not doing it this time around. Oregon and Ohio State in my title game. I think Oregon beats them in Eugene, but I'm going to take Ohio State to win the revenge game in Indianapolis. So,
all right, there is the Big Ten title from Jake. Reese, got something different, or are you going chalk with me?
No, I had the exact same thing, but I have the games flip shaped. I think Ohio State gets them earlier in the year on the road, but I think Oregon makes adjustments and gets them in the championship game. That's my only switch there.
And I think everybody can agree both of these teams would make the college football playoff, right?
All 3
both of your teams?
Yes. There's probably 4 teams. I mean, a lot of people think Michigan can get in. If they beat Texas at home too in week 2, absolutely.
Yeah, that would definitely make a lot of noise. But all right, let's go to players to watch in the conference. I'll let Jake lead us off. Jake, give us your player to watch in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I just don't think I can talk about the kid enough. I'm going to put Jeremiah Smith up there. For most college football fans, I think they do know who that name is already. But for those who just tune in August and September, this is a former 5-star recruit who's the number 1 kid in his class last year. I'm really excited to see if he can be Ohio State's #1 receiving option as a true freshman.
All right, JP, give us your player to watch in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to Rutgers. I'm gonna go Kyle Managai. I think he is top. Sorry, Reese. You want me to switch?
Yeah,
I had
switch.
okay. No, I don't want to give another one away, but I think this is one of the better Big Ten backs in the country, or better backs in the Big Ten, and I think he's underrated in some spots. So, surprised he stayed at Rutgers because I think he had to have money thrown at him.
Reese, you got a 1B ready for us?
I mean, I don't. I haven't had time to research, but I can give more reasons why you should know this guy.
Can I give another person some love? I doubt you.
Go ahead, Shave.
Parks hasn't even gone yet.
Yeah, man. Come
Good
on,
point.
dude.
Don't do it.
You won't have mine, but go ahead.
All right, I'm going to actually do a guy that you mentioned, but Dylan Thieneman is an absolute beast at Purdue in the secondary. He was really good last year, 74 solo tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and 6 picks. He's going to be a first-team all-conference guy. He was an All-American last year, so a huge retention piece for the Boilermakers on the back end who are picked to suck this year. So, Jake, give us your other player to watch.
I'm just going to stick in the wide receiver room. Like Evan Stewart. This is a guy who struggled at A&M. I think it was more like a Jimbo problem than him. This is a former 5-star. I think he was even top 5 in his class.
Mm-hmm.
I think he can take that next level of being like one of the top receivers in college football in Dan Lanning's offense in Oregon. And he's paired up with Tez Johnson. And I don't think we've mentioned that could be the best duo of receivers in college football too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little crazy to say that I want to give another guy love because I don't feel like he gets it. And he's a 5-star wide receiver, but we'll move on from that. Reese, did you have any? Did you have a point you wanted to add for the back?
I mean, there's stuff that I was just gonna say. Like, I think he's a guy that the casuals will not know that guy was a preseason first teamer All Big Ten because like they're gonna recognize the Donovan Edwards, the Nick Singletons, the Keyshawn Jenkins, and Kaytron Allens, but they're not gonna know who that guy is from Rutgers. But I guess my 1B guy to know, I mentioned it before because I already talked about his team, but Aiden Childs, I mean, the transfer from Oregon State going to Michigan State. There's a lot of teams that were after him in the portal, and there's a reason for that. The guy's a good quarterback, the former 4-star. So if Michigan's, they're going to kind of have that little rebuilding year to figure out what they're like with Jonathan Smith. But I think he's going to be a good quarterback to know because who knows what this team is really going to be like this year. If they can play Spooler to one of those bigger teams at the end of the year, I mean, who knows?
All right, let's move on to hot takes. Let's move on to hot takes. Let's do surprise teams and disappointing teams all in the same fashion. JP, do you have a hot take or a surprise or disappointing team within this conference?
I'll do my surprise team. I'm staying on the same tune. I've been singing a little bit here. I think Rutgers surprises some people here. Just schedule
Big
lines
Rutgers
up.
Guy.
Defense is very good. I think they have their identity in the run game. I think Cali McManus is a better quarterback. It's definitely a step up than what they've had the last couple of years. So I'll take Rutgers here. If they get to 7, don't be that stunned if you're a Big Ten fan.
All right, Jake, any hot takes, surprise teams, or disappointment teams?
Yeah, I think I have one for everyone. Rutgers also, I'm going to stick with JP, but I'm going to also throw USC in that spot. I think everybody's biting at the bit, like all these Big Ten fans. I know Iowa and Nebraska, they cannot wait to play the soft West Coast schools. I think they're going to hold up better. I think UCLA down the road is going to hold up better than we think in this league. But those USC is my surprise team for this year, along with Rutgers. My hot take was I think either the air raid at Wisconsin's going to diminish or Luke Fickell won't have a job in a couple of years. I think that I don't like the direction that he's taking this program.
Okay.
It'd be really interesting to see if he tries to take another transfer quarterback next year heading into 2025. I don't love Tyler Van Dyke. I think that everybody knows that. So yeah, I guess that's my hot take if you really want to call it that.
Fair enough. Reese, any surprising teams, disappointing teams, or hot takes from you?
I mean, if we're going to learn from our history of last year where none of us wanted to take Northwestern to win a conference game, how about we take Minnesota's over 2.5 and they just go win 3 or 4 games and just prove us all wrong, slap us in the face.
Minnesota's over-unders at 2.5?
I think it's at 4.5.
No, it's 2.5.
That's what Parks said, 2.5.
It's 2.5.
That's insane, dude.
I'm checking we're not giving
the initial graphic that came from, I want to say it was FanDuel because I've saved it and I've
FanDuel
sent
conference wins in conference.
Yeah,
total wins? It was 2.5.
No way.
I have 5.5 on.
I see 5.5 on Sports right now.
Yeah,
I'll send you guys the graphic here. I'll post it on my Twitter later tonight. And it was the first FanDuel one that came out. It was like Iowa and Nebraska were at 7.5. Minnesota and Purdue were at 2.5.
Wild.
I remember because I sent it to a Minnesota
Imagine
fan.
even
He was
just
not
seeing
happy.
that as a fan though. That's your like Jesus.
Yeah, well, PJ Fleck,
agree.
PJ Fleck guy. But
PJ
all right, my
Fleck.
hot take I
PJ
saved from USC, and maybe it's not as hot as I'm thinking, but it's not something I've heard out in the public eye. But is Lincoln Riley the next Lane Kiffin? Offense,
Is that
offense,
his-
offense. Can't get to the championship because you cannot put a defense together.
Well, I guess we're gonna find out this year because he totally revamped his
He's-
defense too. So
Both of them
And
did.
both do a little bit of a switch up.
I wrote poor man's Lane Kiffin, but I can't put poor man if you're the head coach of USC. Like
Yeah,
you
I
make
was
so
gonna
much
say,
money.
Doesn't make
but-
any
You're a head
sense.
coach, you can't put a flag.
Yeah,
man.
but is he Lane Kiffin? Is he kind of like that guy is just going to be a head coach forever and just never going to be able to put the defense together? I guess we'll have to see.
I mean, yeah,
Poor
if he
guy.
is, it's not a terrible thing to be a top
What a
15
first world problem
college
to have.
football
Poor guy.
coach consistently. But I mean, I think a lot of people would want Lane Kiffin's career. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but here's a good question to end on. Would you rather be a coach that's considered a top 40 coach or 30 coach, but you get one title within your 10 years of coaching and then
Let
you
me-
are kind of
let me-
middle of the pack, or would you rather be
Let me revamp your question where I think I know where you're going. Like, would you be like Matt Campbell? Like Matt
Correct.
Campbell's, you're never going to win a national championship, but would you rather have the career Matt Campbell's had at a program like Iowa State or Lane Kiffin? I'll ask this question
Correct.
back to you.
I mean, asking back to me, I would
Yeah.
say I would rather be probably Campbell because it's like I'm not getting the
Harder
maybe
to
jump off
do?
the page. Yeah, it's harder to do, and I'm not getting the jump off the page recruits and having those expectations and not living up to them because I feel like it shows a lesser coaching job than what
Mhm.
Campbell does at Iowa State.
It's fair enough. Yeah. That's
All
I just
right.
want to be a fire football
Eyes on
coach
him.
at some point in time.
That's
I'm
true.
just trying to
I'd rather be
Jimbo.
Jimbo. I want to be Jimbo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would rather be Scott Frost. That dude's on a beach
That's
flipping
true.
my NIL money somewhere. That son of a bitch. But all right, that's the Big Ten. Let's wrap everything up. Next week is big week. We got the SEC on tap, our last conference preview. Can you believe it's already here? And then we're going to roll into college football season with some previews and some more fun episodes to get you ready for the season. We appreciate you joining us. It's been a long conference preview season ride, but we got one more big one. So we'll see you here same time next week. Reese, what should they do?
Like, comment, subscribe.
JP, what code should they use at No Rivals?
PTFS.
I love it. Free shipping, shop No Rivals. Shout out to our partners. Jake, take us away.
Play it.